So just a little bit, um, so just a little bit about my background, and how I came into the ranger job at Gladhouse. So my love for working outdoors has come from my family background in farming. My own family owned 30 blackface sheep, and sheep herding goes back generations in my family. From a young age, I was helping with sheep work. I was also lucky enough that I grew up getting to play outdoors in woodlands that was nearby. I loved exploring the woodlands as a child and taking the dog for a walk around the lanes as well and the woodland paths. So I knew from a young age that I wanted to work outdoors, but I just wasn't 100% sure how to go around that, other than from farming. But when I started studying, I realised I had different options. Um, so just a little bit about my education background. Um, so I studied at Scotland's Royal College, and I graduated in 2018 with a BSc with honours in Environmental Resource Management. I'm now back at SRUC studying my Masters in Wildlife and Conservation Management. This is a part-time long-distance course, and I'm in my last year and I'll graduate next summer. My MSc course has had some interesting modules, which a couple of them have been relevant to my job as a ranger. So one of these was how to manage outdoors for people in the environment, and the other one was about sustainable education. So just a little bit about my work experiences through work. So I volunteered for Forth Rivers Trust after I graduated for over a year. One of the main projects I was involved in was looking into why volunteers wanted to volunteer for the trust, along with being involved in Fish in the Classroom, where I'd go into schools and they would get to look after the trout eggs for a few months. I then moved up to Kylos Islands Fisheries Trust, which is above Inverness, and this was for 3 months. And I was moving salmon smolts around the dam, as well as looking into peatland restoration. The following season, I managed to get 2 short-term jobs, one back at Forth Rivers Trust and the other one at Ayrshire Rivers Trust. For Forth Rivers Trust, I was helping with the different projects, and with Ayrshire, I was helping them with their fish surveys. In between seasonal work and volunteer work, I worked at Tesco's and as a care assistant. So I've always enjoyed working with people, and mixed with my love of outdoors. When the visitor ranger job came up last year, I thought this would be a great opportunity for myself. Uh, so as one of the visitor rangers for Perth and Kinross Council, last season, I covered 5 locks within the area, and I was engaging with visitors about being responsible users of the different locks. It's also surrounded by Gladhouse is within the Midlothian area, and it's the most southerly reservoir within the area. It's surrounded by the Moorfoot Hills and has 2 islands within the water. Gladhouse is about 5 miles south of Pennycook, and it's south of Edinburgh. The Borders is also not very far away, with Peebles being about 11 miles away. It's about 22 miles from East Lothian. Um, it's It's a good location for many different areas, and I've engaged with people from all those different areas, along with people from Glasgow, Livingston, and Ayrshire, who've all travelled more than an hour to come use Gladhouse. So before Gladhouse became a reservoir, it was known as Moorfoot Loch. It was built into the reservoir in 1879 and was created by engineer James Leslie for the Edinburgh District Water Trust. It's one of the oldest reservoirs to be built in or close to River South Esk. This is a Category B listed building, which is a building of regional or local importance. It was built as the reservoir in the Pentland Hills could no longer keep up with demand. Gladhouse has many different species, from trees to plants to fish and birds. Pink-footed goose is a very important species to Gladhouse, as it gives it a site of scientific interest. The pink-footed goose winters at Gladhouse, so this is not a nesting bird. They can be seen between September to April. They use the surrounding farmlands during the day, and then they will roost in the water at night. So this is making Gladhouse a really good habitat for the goose. There are other breeds of goose at Gladhouse as well, which are Canadian and Greylag. The second very most important species at Gladhouse is osprey. So they've been seen catching fish in the reservoir, so they'll be nesting somewhere in the area. They are an important species, as in the UK they are classified amber list species under the Birds of Conservation Concern. We've also got a mix of trees on site to be found. One of the main ones is Scots pine. Other trees that can be found are birch, hazel, rowan, and hawthorn. There's a fishing club at Gladhouse, as the reservoir has plenty of trout, and this is also what the osprey will be catching. So over the summer, I was really lucky to get a photo of the peacock butterfly on site. This is widespread across the UK, but it was good to see that there's butterflies on site at Gladhouse. So Gladhouse Reservoir is the largest open body of water, of fresh water in the Lothian area at 186 hectares. The South Esk River flows into the reservoir. It supplies water to around 150,000 people within the Midlothian area. So in February 2020, Scottish Water launched its pilot scheme called Enabling Responsible Access. So Scottish Water have actually recognised that the reservoirs are beauty spots and that people want to come and use them for different recreational activities. With COVID, places like Gladhouse have actually become very busy, and locals have told me about how busy it got during lockdown. The increased number of visitors, this has meant that there's more issues on site, and so this is why Gladhouse has been chosen to be part of this project. So the main aim of the project is to reduce the negative behaviour that has been happening on site, along with making visitors aware of water safety. The project also goes along with Scottish Water's Respect Our Reservoir campaign. Scottish Water are wanting to do something positive to reduce the negative behaviour, which is being done through having a ranger on site. So the ranger is there to educate and to talk with visitors about being responsible users. So meet the Scottish Water Ranger team. So we don't all work at the same reservoir, but we work together. So there's myself, Paul and Chi, and there's Ryan and Jane. The other two sites that are part of the pilot are Milngavie, which is outside of Glasgow. So that's where Chi, Ryan, and Jane are the rangers. The other site is Carron Valley within Stirlingshire, which Paul is the ranger on this site. So with Gladhouse being the largest open body of water in the Lothians, during COVID it became a very busy place. Scottish Water in 2020 carried out a survey to understand the activities visitors were doing on site. So over 500 people took part in this survey. So the survey showed that water activities were very popular activities. So that's swimming, paddleboarding, kayaking. So unfortunately, you can't see my screen, but the numbers for swimming are 545, paddleboarding is 391, and kayaking is 209. So walking and dog walking are actually the most popular, and that's at 579. And then for picnicking, it's 255. And camping was the least popular at 43. Scottish Water noted in the report that the low numbers might be due to the younger age range perhaps not taking part in the survey. So with high numbers of visitors coming to Gladhouse, issues started to arise. From the survey, litter was found to be across the site. Parking became very difficult as cars were parking right around the reservoir. And so this is why a clearway got put into place. Damage around site started happening, so fencing was being broken, people were cutting down trees around site, and just some people felt the site had just gotten very busy. The picture I'm looking at is from Midlothian View, taken by Lee Live. If you want to check that picture out to see the cars parked right around, that's where to go. Scottish Water decided it was best to put a ranger on site, but they hadn't had a ranger before. So they felt it was best to work with places that have established rangers. So for Gladhouse, that is Midlothian Ranger Service. When I first started, I got to know the site through visits with other rangers and lone visits myself. Through the visits, I could see the issues for myself, as well as looking over the 2021 report. I also talked with the staff that work at Gladhouse that work for Scottish Water. I also identified the hotspots that are around site. So these are places where visitors would go the most. So getting ready for visitors coming onto site, I came up with messaging that I would talk to them about. So the messaging I came up with was for both the Scottish Outdoor Access Code and water safety. This messaging is to talk to visitors about being responsible users of Gladhouse. For example, I'd be talking about fire safety, where not to have fires, not taking dead wood from site as it's important for our ecosystem, taking litter away, and how far from the toilet they should be going from the water. Water safety, I talk of the dangers associated with the reservoir, so that there's rocks and pipes under the water, that there's undercurrent, and there's always that chance of cold water shock. We can't make anyone, but we definitely encourage people to wear buoyancy aids for the paddleboarding and kayaking. And for anyone who's swimming, we encourage them to wear something bright, so like a swim cap or a toe buoy. And this just makes them more visible in the water to other users. So not long after I started, bird flu happened at Gladhouse. Scottish Water and myself were starting to get reports of dead birds. So this was hitting the geese population like very hard. And Scottish Water started putting up signs around the site to make visitors aware of this issue. So when I was out on site, visitors would ask me about the bird flu, as they were concerned about seeing the dead birds. Um, I would make sure dog walkers would have their dogs on the lead and make sure they were aware that there was bird flu on the site. Every time I was on site and I found a new dead bird, I would use what 3 words to get my location and then pass this on to Scottish Water, who would then let DEFRA know. Scottish Water then arranged for the removal of the dead birds from around Gladhouse. At the moment, it doesn't look like bird flu's come back, but I will keep monitoring with the geese coming back for winter. With me starting in winter, this meant the water was freezing over during cold spells. One of the main issues was people wanting to go out onto the ice to swim in the cold water, and they did this by breaking the ice out on the water. The main concern was that this is dangerous and could also encourage people who have less experience to do it as well. So when I came up with my messaging, I came up with ice safety as well, to discourage visitors from going out onto the ice. And I would advise anyone not to go out onto the frozen water. The advice that the police gave me was that if anyone young was about to go out in the water and was not listening to the advice, then I was to call 999 right away. So with there being more visitors coming onto site, their safety is important as well. So to make sure people visiting the site do not get hurt. So when I first started, I was going around site and I was looking at any safety issues that could be hazardous for visitors. One of the first things I reported back was that the footbridge was unsafe for crossing over. So Scottish Water put a new footbridge in before the busy season started. Another issue I started coming across on site was windblown trees. So these were going across the path, mostly along the southern shore. I had a number of windblown trees. Again, I reported this back to Scottish Water, which this got passed on to their operation team that work on site, and I made sure they knew where to find these trees, and they've now been cut down safely. After any storm or any day where there's maybe just been some high winds, I'll go around site and check if there's any new windblown trees that are unsafe. Fire pits around site have become a real issue as people are making them with stones from the historical wall. So the map I have in the presentation shows fire pits going along both shorelines, and then some further around the reservoir as well. So they are leaving stone circles and ash, which is leaving a trace that somebody was there. As the soil is peat, this means even when they think the fire is out, it's still burning under the ground. So the map is showing the fire pits before I started. I did this map by getting all the locations of the fire pits. And so this is an indication of where people are going on site and where the hotspots are on site. So I cleared all the fire pits before Easter holidays started, but visitors still came and had fires, even though the stone circles were gone. They were just making new ones. One thing I noted was people thought just because there was a fire pit there already, that they thought this was fine to have a fire. And one of the main issues is when it's under tree coverage, this is really unsafe, particularly.
Elspeth, I've accidentally muted you. Could you just unmute yourself, please?
For God's sake. Can you hear me?
Yep. Apologies for that.
Yeah, that's okay. I was talking about fire pits. Did you get most of that?
Yep.
Okay. So there was one group this year that managed to actually set their tent alight when they were taking it down, just because they were too close to their fire. So again, that's quite unsafe. So the next map, I know you can't see it, but it's what I created was where I should be checking every day. So I've got along the main two shorelines. Um, that's in red. So that needs checked every day. That's where it's the most busiest. There's a couple other sections that are in orange, so they need checked every couple of days. So they're still busy, but they're not as busy as the red areas. There's one stretch that's in green, that is going down the south woodland, and that maybe just needs checked once a week. And sort of the rest of the kind of area around Gladhouse, the sort of main walking route, maybe needs checked once or twice a year. So the main areas that need checked are the shorelines and the woodland areas beside them. And these areas are pretty much right beside the road, all of them, and which just gives people easy access. So I'm part of a group that is designing a signage board for Gladhouse. So at first, I was helping to sort of just see where around site it'd be best to put this. I was also looking at where the old signage is. So was this up to date? Is this being removed? You know, is it appropriate? I've also been helping with information that should be going onto the board. So what's going to go into this board is history, wildlife, and water safety information. At the moment, it's still being worked on by the group, but hopefully it'll be getting finished soon. In the meantime, I was needing something to go around site, so I could actually get information out to visitors. One of the Midlothian Ranger volunteers took some time out to help me, and we built 3 notice boards to go around Gladhouse. So they were made out of wood that I painted, and then put information about Gladhouse on there. One of the main things was the Gladhouse Reservoir email address. So at the moment on these boards, I have posters about being a responsible camper, along with a poster about the outdoor festival. And these boards have come in very helpful for myself. So I had 3 school groups up in June to trial out what I'd come up with for the activities, for them. So I came up with 2 activities. So one was a tree trail. So I chose 5 trees along one of the paths. And then I gave the kids a list of the trees and an ID sheet. And they were able to identify all 5 of them, which was fantastic. I also came up with a trail that was all about the Scottish Outdoor Access Code and motor safety. So this was giving them different scenarios and options for how they could be a responsible user. So an example was they had to choose how best to set up a fire when camping. So they had the choice of between having a raised fire pit, having a fire pit out on the shoreline, or having a fire pit that was like under tree coverage. And obviously the right answer was to have a raised fire pit. Another example for water safety, they had to choose between a large stick, a rope, or waders for what could be used to help someone if they were in trouble in the water. And obviously the answer there was rope. So this was done through a mixture of like objects and photos. I also did a water safety table that had different things on it to talk about with the group. I had a bowl covered up with water and stones in it so they could have a feel within that. And this then led on to a talk about what's under the water as well as cold water shock. I then had them match up water safety signs with the photos and wording, and I gave them a demonstration of the air curtain, which I'm going to tell you about now. So the air curtain, it breaks up the algae in the water, and this is to stop it from getting into the drinking water. So this works by like loads of bubbles get blown into the water, and then it creates anti-buoyancy. So this means anyone who went into that area of the air curtain could not stay afloat at all. The air curtain is, unfortunately you can't see the photo, but it's marked out by orange buoys in a sort of square shape. So this is just to warn visitors that it's there, but actually quite a lot of people haven't heard of it. So that's part of my chat with the visitors and with school groups. I've actually came up with a miniature air curtain. So in one of my photos here, there's no bubbles in the water, and you can see the little toy people floating in the water. And then in the second photo, what's happening is I've got the electric air pump on, and none of the characters can stay afloat. They're all getting pushed down. So what it's made out of is a plastic cereal tub, an inner tube, and an electric air pump. So I'm now going to talk about visitor data. So the data that I gathered from visitors was looking at the number that were in the group, what activity they were up to that day, were they having fires, were they having barbecues, how many cars were they bringing, and how far did they travel. Other questions that were being asked was, were they aware there was a ranger in place? Did they see it as something positive? And do they know where to get more information about Gladhouse? Other data I was also gathering was how many hot fires I put out, how many fire pits I had to destroy, was there any toilet sites, and did I have to pick up rubbish that day? So to begin with, I came up with a table that had all the data that I needed to gather on each visit. So I took my experience from being a visitor ranger last year and what data I gathered from there, and then I was able to put this together. And once it was written down, I would then put it into an Excel spreadsheet. I then worked with Scottish Water with how to gather the data so it could actually be done through the phone. So what we found worked best for us was to use MS Forms, and using what I'd already set up with paper, they then put this into MS Forms. So I had my messaging ready, I got the fire pits cleared, and my SWAC signs were up. And so I was ready for the busy season to start. I was working the weekends during school holidays, as this is when the site was busiest. So overall, I had 1,917 visitors come to Gladhouse since I started in November. Over the summer, so from June to September, I had 1,367 visitors on site. So I might have not engaged with all these visitors, but I will have engaged with the majority of them. And so most people were coming for water activities, and I had some larger groups that were coming for camping. And there were also your usual dog walkers and walkers. So I put out 15 hot fires around site that had been left. And I also collected litter when I could. So in one of the photos here is actually one of the worst fires I had to put out. It's quite a large area, and like I said, because it's peaty soil, it keeps burning. There's trees around it, so it's actually burnt down to the roots of some of these trees. There's lots of stones. This fire, before I started putting water on it, actually reignited. So that wasn't safe, and so I just had to keep putting water on it until it was kind of out. There's another picture which has rubbish on it, and then there's another picture where it's a fire pit, but somebody must have had one of those kind of pull out kind of summer chairs that got broken. They just left it on top of that fire pit. So unfortunately, I found 10 sort of toilet sites around site, so where people had like left their toilet paper. Sadly, people were also cutting down trees or branches. And I've also been taking stones from the wall. People were going out onto the large island where I could see they were having fires. And I've also had reports back that there's litter on site. On a busy day, I could engage with 30 people in one group, in one day, I should say. So I came up with my dissertation based at Gladhouse. So I've been really lucky that both Midlothian Council and Scottish Water have been very supportive of me carrying out my dissertation at Gladhouse. My title is, Has there been a change in use of outdoor spaces associated with COVID-19 pandemic? So last season, when working as a visitor ranger, I realised that outdoor spaces like the locks had become very busy during COVID lockdown, and they were still popular after everything had opened up again. So when I started at Gladhouse and seen the same issues that I was dealing with as a visitor ranger, I decided I wanted to base my dissertation on these changes and do this at Gladhouse. So I set up a face-to-face survey as part of my dissertation to see the change since COVID, looking at the change since COVID and how much do people understand about being a responsible user. So the types of questions I was asking were, we're looking at how often people were visiting Gladhouse before, during and after lockdown, what activities brought them to Gladhouse, and why had they chosen Gladhouse, had they heard of Right to Roam, and what did they understand, had they heard of the Scottish Outdoor Access Code, and how much did they understand, along with questions that were about did they think something was responsible or not. An example is having a fire under a tree. So I had gotten 115 people to take part in my survey, and at the moment I'm putting that data into Excel. I've got over halfway writing it up, and then I'll start looking at what best data analysis techniques will I need to carry out. So at the moment, what I've noted from my data when it comes to how often people come to Gladhouse is that there's a number that have started coming more since COVID, but there's also a number who have been coming less since COVID, but they came quite a lot before. There's a lot of people who haven't heard of Right of Access or the Scottish Outdoor Access Code. There's a number who've heard of both or there's and there's some who've only just heard of outdoor access code. At the moment, these are just observations, and I'll have to get into it more to get more understanding. So we were approached by the local community citizen science group, Riverlife, on the Riverfly on the Esk, which has been doing biological and chemical monitoring of the River Esk for 4 years, and has partnered with Esk Valley Trust for the last 2. So they asked if we could help survey the site near the source of the South River Esk that flows into Gladhouse, to complete the catchment scale monitoring. They approached us as they were keen to work with members and organisations in the local community, and since I was in place, it was something I was able to take on. They're all volunteers that cover different parts of the River Esk that go surveying once a month. So the monitoring can only be done with a minimum of 2 people for health and safety. So I was able to find a volunteer who was up for coming out. So first we had to do online training. So this is going over health and safety, reasons for the monitoring, along with learning about the groups of riverfly that we were going to be looking for. So this is following following the practical training session, we put the theory into practice. So we learned how to do the kick sampling. So this is where you put the net into the water, and then you disturb the substrate by kicking upstream of the net, and then the invertebrates drift down into the net. After this is done a few times, you move up the river, and you take the net with you, and then you put it into a tray of water once you've done it a few times. Then you spend time identifying, separating, and counting the different groups of riverfly. So the groups that we're looking for are case caddis, caseless caddis, mayfly, blue wing olive, flat body olive, olives, and stoneflies. So the reason for the survey is that riverfly can be an indicator of water quality depending on which species are present. The groups that we look at are all very sensitive to pollution, so make great indicators of water quality. With this being the first season that there was a ranger at Gladhouse, overall, I feel most people were positive to have felt it was positive to have a ranger on site, but this did not stop the negative behaviour completely. One of my main aims is to continue working with Scottish Water to see what else can be done to reduce the negative behaviour. So this could be looking at maybe different signage, if there's something we can improve there, or whether, if the rangers continue, maybe looking at timings of when rangers are on site. Another aim is to work with school groups to engage with kids about water safety and responsible access. We'll continue with the riverfly survey work, weather dependent. I'll continue to clear up fire pits. I'll also keep talking to people on site, even though it's the off season, and just generally doing site checks. And obviously, I will be doing my dissertation over the winter months, analysing the data, as well as looking at reports and papers for my literature review. Thank you for listening. Do you have any questions?